Good evening, dear friends, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Wherever you're listening from tonight, maybe tucked safely under the blankets, curled up in your favorite quiet corner of the house, or perhaps lying somewhere peaceful while the world slowly quiets down outside. I'm so happy you're here with me. Take a slow, gentle breath in. Let your shoulders soften and drop. Maybe pull the blanket or duvet up just a little higher and allow the day to quietly drift away. Ashford Manor was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant, refined, every guest playing their role in a world of illusions. Then Sir Reginald Hargrove was found dead inside his revolutionary Metaverse chamber. A room of mirrors and projections, creating virtual realities from light and shadow. His body slumped amid shimmering illusions of distant lands. A poisoned chalice in his hand, police saw a tragic accident in this 1950s marvel of optical theater. But Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this theater of innovation was playing a role, the role of innocent, the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. Ashford Manor stood like a grand Art Deco theatre dropped into the quiet English countryside. Its sleek white facade, black lacquered windows, and geometric chrome accents caught the pale autumn sun of 1953. Inside, every detail had been rehearsed for elegance. Polished mahogany panels, velvet curtains the color of midnight, crystal chandeliers that tinkled softly whenever someone passed beneath them. The air carried expensive perfume, Chanel No. 5, mixed with the faint sweetness of hothouse lilies, and the darker note of Cuban cigar smoke that still lingered from the previous evening. This weekend, the manor was to become something more ambitious. The demonstration stage for Sir Reginald Hargrove's latest invention, the Metaverse chamber. Not a machine of wires and valves, but a room of optical illusion. Mirrors, lenses, projected light, and moving scenery that could make a person believe they stood in Cairo, on the deck of an ocean liner, or beneath the stars of the Sahara. A theatre of the mind, Sir Reginald called it. A place where reality performed whatever role the inventor wished. Hercule Poirot arrived just after 4 o'clock. He stepped from the black Daimler, small and precise, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from the sleeve of his charcoal suit. The cold terrace air brushed his face. Inside, and the drawing room promised firelight and warmth. As he crossed the threshold, the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 4 slow, deliberate notes. Footsteps echoed on parquet. Silk rustled. A champagne cork popped somewhere distant. Sir Reginald greeted him with outstretched hand and booming voice. Monsieur Poirot, the man who unmasks every performance, welcome to my theatre of tomorrow. His sandalwood cologne arrived before the handshake. His smile was wide, practiced. Poirot noted the slight tremor in the fingers that offered him a crystal flute of icy champagne. Most intriguing, Sir Reginald, Poirot replied, tilting his egg-shaped head. A room that lies so beautifully, it becomes truth. Very dangerous, no? The other guests had already taken their marks. A Lady Evelyn Hargrove glided forward in a midnight blue silk gown that caught the firelight like liquid. She played the perfect hostess, warm smile, gentle pressure of gloved fingers. But her eyes flicked too quickly toward the corridor that led to the Metaverse chamber. Her perfume was sharp, almost offensive. Dr. Victor Lang, tall and angular in rough tweed, stood near the fireplace. He was Sir Reginald's collaborator, the man who had helped perfect the mirrors and lenses. He held a cigar but did not light it. Instead, he turned it slowly between his fingers, as though rehearsing a line. His voice was calm, technical, almost too measured when he spoke of refracting reality through geometry. Miss Clara Beaumont, the niece, sat on the edge of a velvet sofa. She wore soft kid gloves and sipped black coffee, whose bitter richness clung to the air. She performed the role of innocent ingenue perfectly. Wide eyes, soft voice, small nervous laugh, but her fingers twisted the linen napkin in her lap until the fabric creased. Mr. Harold Fitzroy, broad-shouldered and loud, occupied the space near the window. A rival investor, he had come to see whether the metaverse was worth his money or merely a rich man's toy. Cigar smoke curled from his lips and drifted toward the ceiling like stage fog. He laughed too often, too heartily. His eyes never quite matched the sound. Captain Arthur Drake, lean and watchful, paced slowly near the terrace doors. Old friend from the war, he wore the part of loyal comrade with ease. Firm handshake, the quiet nods. But the rain tapping the glass behind him seemed to keep time with his restless steps. His leather boots left faint marks on the polished floor. Poirot watched them all. He arranged 3 silver coasters symmetrically on the low table before him. His small hands moved with precision. His green eyes gleamed. "Observe, mes amis," he said softly, as though speaking to an unseen audience. "Each of you has already begun your performance. The stage is set, the lights are up, and now someone will forget their lines." At 20 minutes past 8, the scream came, high, sharp, unmistakable. It sliced through the distant piano music like a knife through velvet. Guests hurried down the corridor, footsteps clattering, silk rustling, doors opening and closing with soft, expensive thuds. And they found Sir Reginald Hargrove inside the Metaverse chamber. He lay slumped across a low chaise, surrounded by flickering illusions. Moonlit desert, palm trees swaying, stars turning slowly overhead. The projection still ran, the machinery hummed. A heavy crystal chalice had fallen from his hand. Dark wine stained the white carpet. The faint smell of bitter almonds rose from the spilled liquid and mixed with the wood smoke drifting in from the hall. Lady Evelyn gave a small, controlled cry and pressed a dry handkerchief to dry eyes. Dr. Lung knelt swiftly, felt for a pulse, then rose again with clinical calm. Miss Beaumont swayed and clutched the doorframe. Captain Drake swore once, low. Mr. Fitzroy stared at the body, as though waiting for it to stand, and laugh at the joke. The local police inspector arrived within the hour. He looked at the chalice, the almonds, the locked room, the running projector. "Accidental poisoning," he announced almost at once. Poor chap must have experimented with something toxic inside his own machine. Tragic, but straightforward. Poirot stood apart, hands clasped behind his back. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "Mais non," he said quietly. "This is no accident. This is theater. A very carefully rehearsed performance." He turned to the group, his voice carrying just enough to reach every ear. "Someone among you has played the part of innocent guest. Someone has played the part of murderer. And someone," his eyes moved slowly across each face, "has already forgotten one small, fatal line." The fire crackled in the drawing room behind them. Rain tapped the tall windows. The chandelier overhead gave a faint, the musical shiver. Poirot made one small expressive gesture with his hands. The stage was set. The actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The morning light came thin and grey through the tall windows of Ashford Manor. Rain still tapped insistently against the glass, a soft, irregular rhythm that seemed to underscore every conversation. Inside the drawing room, the fire had been freshly laid. Its crackle fought the chill that crept in from the terrace. The scent of strong continental coffee drifted from silver pots, mingling with furniture wax, wilting lilies, and the faint, stubborn trace of last night's cigar smoke. Hercule Poirot sat at the small escritoire near the window. He had arranged 3 pencils, a blotter, and an empty coffee cup in perfect alignment. His green eyes moved slowly across the room as the household gathered, one by one, like actors answering a stage manager's call. "Today," he announced quietly, "we begin the proper scenes. Each of you will come to me. Each of you will speak. And Poirot, he will watch." Lady Evelyn Hargrove was the first to enter the improvised interview space, a corner of the library screened by tall velvet curtains. She wore charcoal grey silk, understated yet expensive. Her kid gloves were immaculate, her posture perfect. She sat and immediately began the performance of the grieving widow. Soft voice, lowered lashes, a handkerchief pressed briefly to the corner of one dry eye. She described the previous evening, how Reginald had been excited, almost feverish, about showing the Metaverse chamber to the investors. She said she had retired to the library with a book shortly after 8 o'clock. She heard nothing unusual until the scream. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "You were reading, madame?" "Jane Austen, Northanger Abbey." "A charming choice. And the gramophone in the drawing room, it was playing?" "No, I believe it had been turned off earlier." Poirot made a small note. "Yet Captain Drake says he distinctly heard piano music at 8:30. Lady Evelyn's gloved fingers tightened by the smallest degree. "Perhaps he is mistaken. Perhaps." Poirot's voice remained gentle. "Observe, mon ami," he seemed to murmur to the invisible audience, "how smoothly the line is delivered. Too smoothly. Truth does not rehearse so carefully." Dr. Victor Lang came next. He carried the faint smell of sandalwood cologne and laboratory ether. His tweed jacket was rough against the polished chair he chose. He spoke briskly, technically. The Metaverse chamber used no dangerous chemicals, only light, mirrors, and lenses. The poison, he suggested, must have been introduced deliberately into the chalice before Reginald entered the room. "And where were you, Doctor? Between 8 and 8:30? "On the terrace, smoking, in the rain." "I like the rain." Poirot smiled faintly, and yet no wet footprints were found leading back into the house. No damp patches on the carpet, no droplets on your cuffs. Lang's jaw tightened. "I dried off in the cloakroom." "Ah, convenient." The mask slips, Poirot thought. Did you catch it? The quick blink, the unnecessary detail about the cloakroom. Miss Clara Beaumont arrived with red-rimmed eyes that looked genuine, yet her hands were steady as she accepted a cup of coffee. The bitter taste lingered on her tongue as she spoke. Uncle Reginald had promised her a small allowance increase once the Metaverse was patented. She had been in the morning room, writing letters. She heard nothing. She loved her uncle dearly. Poirot watched the way she cradled the hot cup, as though seeking warmth she did not truly need. "You twist your napkin, mademoiselle, even now." "I'm nervous." "Of what?" "Of everything." Her voice cracked on the last word. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Ask yourself," he seemed to invite the listener, But why does this young woman play the fragile flower so perfectly, and yet her cup does not tremble? Captain Arthur Drake entered like a man marching to orders. His leather boots left the faintest squeak on the parquet. He stood rather than sat. He gave short, soldierly answers. He had been on the terrace the whole time after dinner, thinking about old campaigns. He had not entered the Metaverse chamber. He had no reason to harm Reginald. Yet you argued with him last month, Poirot said mildly. About money, about a loan that was never repaid. Drake's face darkened. That was settled. Settled, or merely postponed. The captain looked away toward the rain-streaked window. You're wasting time. On the contrary, Poirot replied. Time reveals. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how the shoulders stiffen, how the voice drops half a tone. Yet this is not anger. This is fear performing as anger. Harold Fitzroy was last. He brought the smell of fresh cigar smoke with him. He sat heavily, crossed his legs, attempted a laugh. Terrible business, Poirot. Terrible. But these things happen in invention. Someone gets greedy. Someone gets careless. You were seen near the chamber door at 8:15. I looked in. Wanted to see if Reginald was ready for the demonstration. You did not enter. No. Then why is there a smudge of your cigar ash on the inside door handle? Fitzroy blinked once, then laughed again, too loud. Must have brushed against it earlier. Poirot arranged a pen and a paperweight symmetrically. Bravo. But the performance, it is not convincing. When the last interview ended, Poirot stood alone for a moment among the bookshelves. The rain had eased. A pale sunlight now slanted across the carpet. The scent of coffee had faded, replaced by the clean, waxy smell of floor polish. Somewhere distant, a clock chimed the quarter hour. He walked back to the drawing room, where the others waited, scattered across sofas and armchairs like actors who had forgotten their blocking. Lady Evelyn stared into the fire. Dr. Lang cleaned his spectacles with unnecessary care. Clara twisted her napkin again. Drake paced. Fitzroy lit another cigar. Poirot stopped in the center of the room. He made one small, expressive gesture with his hands. Every actor has now taken their mark. Each has spoken their prepared lines. Yet already we have missed cues, contradictory alibis, small gestures that betray the script. He turned slowly, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. Here someone among you is playing the part of innocent, someone is playing the part of murderer, and someone, his voice dropped to a near whisper, has already begun to forget their lines. The fire snapped. A single raindrop slid slowly down the window pane. The players had entered. Chapter 3. The first act. The afternoon light at Ashford Manor had turned the color of old ivory. Heavy clouds pressed low outside, but inside the library, the fire burned steadily, sending small sparks up the chimney like misplaced applause. The smell of wood smoke blended with cooling coffee and the faint, lingering trace of Lady Evelyn's Chanel. Poirot had chosen this room for the next phase. Its tall shelves and deep armchairs created natural pockets of privacy, perfect for watching performances, without the performers feeling entirely watched. He began with the small physical clues, the ones police had dismissed as irrelevant. The chalice itself, heavy crystal. No fingerprints except Sir Reginald's. The wine residue still gave off that faint, bitter almond scent of cyanide. But what interested Poirot more was the position of the body. Slumped forward, one arm extended as though reaching towards the control panel of the Metaverse projector. The panel itself was clean. No smudges, No sign anyone else had touched the switches after the mechanism began running. Poirot stood in the center of the Metaverse chamber, now silent, its mirrors and lenses dark. He turned slowly, taking in every reflection. The illusion has stopped, he murmured, but the performance continues. He crouched beside the chaise where Sir Reginald had died. A single drop of spilled wine had dried on the white carpet in a small, perfect circle. Nearby lay one kid glove, women's size, pale cream leather. It did not belong to Lady Evelyn. Her gloves were darker and longer. Poirot lifted the glove with the tips of 2 fingers. He sniffed. A trace of lavender cologne. Not strong, but unmistakable. Interesting, he said to the empty room. Someone was here after the body was discovered. Someone who did not wish to be seen touching anything. He returned to the library with the glove in a clean envelope. The group had been asked to assemble. They sat scattered, postures stiffening as he entered. Poirot placed the envelope on the low table between them and arranged it symmetrically beside a crystal ashtray. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, and the first act of our little drama has revealed something important. He turned first to Miss Clara Beaumont. Mademoiselle, this glove is yours, no? Clara's face drained of color. She stared at the envelope as though it might bite. I lost one yesterday, before dinner. I looked everywhere. Yet it was found inside the Metaverse chamber, near the body, after the police had already sealed the room. I didn't go back in there, she whispered. I swear. Poirot tilted his head. The mask slips. Did you catch it? The voice drops. The eyes go to the left. She is not lying about the glove, but she is lying about something else. The room grew quieter. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Poirot moved to Dr. Lang next. Doctor, you examined the body. You declared death by cyanide. Yet you did not mention that the poison had barely begun to work. The lips were only faintly blue, the pupils only slightly dilated. Sir Reginald was dead before the poison had time to spread fully. Lang frowned. That's impossible. The dose was massive. No, the dose was theatrical, enough to look convincing, but administered after death. A ripple of shock passed through the group. Poirot continued. Someone wished us to believe in poison. Someone wished us to look no further. But the body tells its own story. Sir Reginald was already dead when the chalice was placed in his hand. Lady Evelyn gave a small gasp. Poirot turned to her. Madame, you played grief beautifully last night. The dry handkerchief, the controlled tremble. But real grief is messy. Real grief leaves marks, mascara, swollen eyes, uneven breathing. Yours was technically perfect. He paused. Too perfect. Captain Drake spoke suddenly. You're saying someone staged the whole thing? Mais oui. And staged it with care. The projector running, the exotic illusion still turning, the chalice placed just so. A performance for the police. And for us. Poirot stepped back, hands clasped behind him. I am reminded of a case many years ago, the Ackroyd affair in King's Abbot. A man was murdered in his study. The family performed shocks so convincingly that even the local police accepted suicide at first glance. Everyone wept appropriately. Everyone spoke in hushed tones. Yet one small detail betrayed them. The murderer reached for his cigarette case with a hand that did not shake. A truly shocked person fumbles. A truly grieving person cannot control the tremor. But this man, he had rehearsed in front of a mirror. He had practiced the gasp, the widening eyes, the sudden sitting. He forgot only one thing. The body betrays what the face hides. The little grey cells remember that lesson well. He looked around the silent room. Here too, we have rehearsals. Here too, we have perfect timing. And here too, someone has already made one small mistake. Poirot returned to the table and lifted the envelope once more. This glove did not walk into the chamber by itself. Someone placed it there, perhaps to confuse, perhaps to incriminate. But the psychology is clear. The person who did this is afraid. Fear performs as confidence. Fear performs as outrage. Fear performs as innocence. He let the words hang. Ask yourself, mes amis, if you had killed, how would you act? Would you weep too much, yet or too little? Would you explain too quickly, or stay too silent? No one answered. The rain had stopped. A single ray of late sunlight cut across the carpet, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny actors on an empty stage. Poirot made one slow, deliberate gesture with his small hands. The first act has concluded. Some masks have cracked. More will follow. He turned toward the window, watching the clouds finally part. The theatre of Ashford Manor was only beginning to show its true lighting. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. The evening drew in early at Ashford Manor, the sky the color of tarnished silver. Inside, every lamp had been lit. Warm pools of light reflected off polished mahogany and crystal decanters. Yet the air still felt cold, as though the house itself sensed the tightening of the drama. The scent of fresh wood smoke from the drawing-room fire mixed with the sharp citrus bite of someone's aftershave and the faint sweetness of dying roses left too long in their vase. A grandfather clock in the hall struck 6 slow, deliberate notes. Hercule Poirot had decided the time had come to press. No more gentle scenes, no more polite listening. Tonight, the actors would feel the spotlight grow hotter. He gathered them once again in the long drawing room, velvet curtains drawn against the night, fire crackling, champagne glasses standing untouched on silver trays. He began without preamble. Mesdames et messieurs, the alibis you have offered are like scripts, beautifully written, carefully learned. But scripts have one weakness. When the actor is frightened, the lines begin to falter. He turned first to Lady Evelyn. Madame, you said you were in the library reading Northanger Abbey from 8 o'clock until the scream. Yet the book you were supposedly reading was returned to the shelf upside down. A small thing, perhaps. But a reader who is truly absorbed does not replace a book in such disorder. A reader who is pretending to read might. Lady Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. I was upset. I was not paying attention. Upset, Poirot repeated softly. Yet your eyes were dry, your breathing even. Your hands did not shake. Grief does not rehearse so neatly, madame. He moved to Dr. Lang. Doctor, you insisted you smoked on the terrace, in the rain, for 25 minutes. Yet your cigar case was dry. Your matches were dry. Your shoes showed no trace of wet grass. And Poirot lifted one small hand. The cloakroom towel you claim to have used was still folded, unused. The performance is clever, but the props do not match the story. Lang's jaw worked. I dried my hands on my handkerchief. Then where is this handkerchief now? A silence. Poirot tilted his head. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth, until they do not. Miss Clara Beaumont sat very still, her kid gloves folded in her lap like a prayer. Poirot approached gently, almost kindly. Mademoiselle, the glove found in the chamber. You said you lost it before dinner. Yet one of the maids saw you wearing both gloves when you came down to the drawing room at 7:45. So either the maid is lying, or you returned to the chamber later, perhaps to place something, perhaps to remove something. Clara's voice came out small. I didn't kill him. No one has yet accused you of murder, Poirot said. Only of poor rehearsal. Captain Drake stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel, as though steadying himself. Poirot turned to him next. Captain, you are a man of action, a soldier, yet your story is strangely passive. You stood on the terrace. You heard nothing. You saw nothing. You did nothing. A man of your training does not remain so inert when a scream is heard, unless he already knew what the scream would mean. Drake's eyes narrowed. You're twisting everything. None. I am merely shining the spotlight where the actor does not wish it to fall. Harold Fitzroy attempted a laugh. It came out hoarse. Come now, Poirot. We're all a bit rattled. No need to play the Grand Inquisitor. Poirot regarded him calmly. Mr. Fitzroy, you said you looked into the chamber at 8:15, but did not enter. Yet a smudge of your cigar ash was found on the inside handle. And, he paused, a single thread from your cuff was caught on the projector's control lever. The lever Sir Reginald never touched after he entered the room, because he was already dead. Fitzroy's cigar trembled between his fingers. That proves nothing. It proves opportunity, Poirot said quietly. And opportunity, when combined with motive, becomes very interesting indeed. The room had grown so still that the fire's crackle sounded loud. Poirot walked slowly to the center, small hands clasped behind his back. He spoke to them all. Each of you has a prepared performance. The grieving widow, the loyal colleague, the innocent niece, the steadfast friend, the jovial rival. But the more pressure I apply, the more the lines begin to crack. A missed detail here, a contradiction there, a gesture too many or too few. He stopped before the low table and arranged 3 crystal glasses in a perfect triangle. Truth needs no rehearsal. Truth does not care if the lighting is flattering. Truth simply is. But lies. He looked up, meeting every pair of eyes in turn. Lies require constant attention. And attention falters. Memory falters. Courage falters. Lady Evelyn's shoulders gave the smallest tremor. Dr. Long's fingers tightened around his empty glass until the knuckles showed white. Clara's gloves slipped to the floor. Captain Drake exhaled sharply, like a man who had been holding his breath too long. Fitzroy stubbed out his cigar with unnecessary force. Sash scattered across the polished table. Poirot made one slow, deliberate gesture, sweeping his hand toward them all. Rehearsed lines are beginning to falter. The script is failing. Someone in this room knows the ending of this play. Someone wrote it. And very soon, his voice dropped to a near whisper. Someone will be unable to remember the next line. The fire snapped once, sharply. Outside, the wind rose and rattled the tall windows. The champagne in the untouched glasses had gone flat. Tiny bubbles no longer rose. Poirot drew himself up, still small, yet somehow filling the room. Very soon now. The mask will not merely slip. It will fall. Rehearsed lines began to falter. Chapter 5. The mask slip's night had fully claimed Ashford Manor. The long windows of the drawing room showed only black glass now, reflecting the firelight and the small circle of people, gathered like reluctant players under a single spotlight. The air was thick with wood smoke, the faint metallic tang of cooling champagne, and the nervous scent of expensive perfume beginning to turn sour. A single log cracked loudly in the grate. No one spoke for several seconds after the sound. Hercule Poirot stood in the center of the room, small and still. He had asked them to assemble once more, not scattered across sofas this time, but seated in a rough semicircle facing him, as though they were on stage and he the director calling for the climactic scene. No polite preliminaries tonight, no gentle questions. The time for rehearsal was over. He began with Clara Beaumont. "Mademoiselle," he said quietly, "you have played the fragile niece with great skill. Wide eyes, into a trembling lip, the twisting of the napkin. Yet tonight, we will speak plainly. The glove found in the Metaverse chamber was not lost before dinner. You wore both when you came downstairs at 7:15. The maid saw you. I have spoken with her again." Clara's face crumpled. She shook her head once, then again, faster. I didn't kill him." "No," Poirot agreed gently. "You did not kill him. But you were there. After. Tears came then. Real ones this time, messy and sudden." She pressed both hands to her mouth, as though to hold the words inside. But they spilled anyway. "I went back. After the scream. I thought maybe he was only ill. I wanted to help. I opened the door. I saw him. I saw the chalice. I panicked. I ran out again. I didn't touch anything. I swear I didn't touch anything." Poirot nodded once, and the room exhaled. But he did not let the moment settle. He turned to Captain Drake. "Captain, you are a man trained to observe, to act. Yet you stood on the terrace for 25 minutes in the rain and did nothing when you heard a scream from inside the house. A soldier does not freeze, unless—" Poirot's voice became very soft. He already knew there would be a scream, unless he had arranged that there would be one. Drake came to his feet. "That's a damned lie." Poirot did not flinch. "No, it is a deduction. You argued with Sir Reginald last month over a debt, a large debt. You told no one it had been settled because it had not. You needed money, quickly. The Metaverse patents were worth a fortune. If Reginald died before the patents were filed in his name alone, the estate and the patents would be divided. You would receive a share." Drake's hands clenched. His breathing grew loud, ragged. Poirot continued without raising his voice. "You did not poison him, Captain. You struck him from behind. A single heavy blow to the base of the skull with the marble bookend from the library shelf. You carried him into the Metaverse chamber. You arranged the chalice. You started the projector to create the illusion of a longer death scene. Then you returned to the terrace to wait for the scream, your own scream perhaps, to be the first to discover him." Drake swayed. The color drained from his face so quickly it looked like stage lighting being dimmed. "I didn't mean—" His voice cracked. "I only wanted to talk, to make him see reason. He laughed at me, called me a failure, said I'd never amount to anything. I lost my temper. It was one blow, just one." A terrible silence followed. Poirot turned slowly toward Dr. Victor Lang. "And you, Doctor, you helped." Lang's head jerked up. "I did nothing of the kind." "You certified the death by poison," Poirot said calmly. "You knew it was not true. The cyanosis was too faint, the pupils too little dilated. You are a physician. You recognized a head injury when you saw one. Yet you said nothing. Why?" Lang's mouth worked soundlessly. Poirot answered for him. "Because Captain Drake promised you a share of the patents. A generous share. Enough to fund your own research. Enough to leave Sir Reginald's shadow forever. You performed the role of shocked colleague. You played it well. But tonight the mask is too heavy. Lang dropped his head into his hands. A low, broken sound came from him. Not quite a sob, or more like something mechanical, finally giving way. Poirot faced them all. Mesdames et messieurs, the psychology is simple. Greed performed as loyalty, fear performed as innocence, resentment performed as friendship. But the body does not lie forever. The hands tremble. The voice cracks. The eyes look away when the lie is spoken aloud. He stepped closer to Drake. You struck the blow, Captain. You killed Sir Reginald Hargrove, but you could not have carried the deception alone. Dr. Lang covered the cause of death. Miss Beaumont, out of fear and confusion, entered the chamber afterward and left her glove. Each of you played a part. Each of you forgot one fatal line. Lady Evelyn had not spoken. She sat perfectly still, gloved hands folded, face unreadable. Poirot regarded her for a long moment. Madame, you knew. She lifted her chin. Oh, I suspected, but I did not act. Poirot nodded once. That is why your grief was dry. You mourned the man you had once loved, but you had already buried him in your heart, long before tonight. The fire had burned low. Only embers glowed now, casting long shadows across the velvet and the mahogany. Poirot made one final gentle gesture with his small hands. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. No one moved, no one spoke. Outside, the wind had dropped. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The performance was over. Only truth remained. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. The drawing room at Ashford Manor felt smaller now. The heavy velvet curtains had been drawn tight against the night, shutting out the world so that only the firelight and the glow of 3 table lamps remained. The scent of dying roses had grown cloying. It mixed with the sharp bite of old cigar smoke that still clung to the upholstery, and the faint, medicinal trace of cyanide that seemed to linger in everyone's memory. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 10. Each chime fell like a slow curtain between acts. Hercule Poirot had not sat down. He walked slowly along the length of the room, small hands clasped behind his back, his polished shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. The others remained in their places, Lady Evelyn rigid on the sofa, Dr. Lang staring at his own hands, Clara Beaumont curled into herself, Captain Drake standing by the fireplace as though he might bolt at any moment. Harold Fitzroy slumped in an armchair, with an unlit cigar forgotten between his fingers. Poirot stopped at the low table, where the crystal chalice still stood, now empty and innocent-looking under the lamplight. Behind every curtain, he said quietly, there is a secret. Behind every secret, there is a motive. Tonight, we draw back the last curtains. He turned first to Lady Evelyn. Madame, you have said very little. You have watched. You have performed composure. But composure is also a mask. Let us look behind it. He lifted a small leather-bound notebook from the table, one that had been found locked in Sir Reginald's private desk that afternoon. These are your husband's private entries, not the public diary, the real one, hidden behind a false panel in the study. Shall I read? Lady Evelyn's gloved hands tightened until the kid leather creaked. Poirot opened the book to a marked page. Evelyn believes the Bartons will make us untouchable. She does not know I have already transferred the foreign rights to a trust in Clara's name. If anything happens to me, Evelyn will receive nothing beyond the house and a small annuity. She thinks I trust her. I do not. She has been meeting Long in secret for months. A sound escaped Lady Evelyn. Not a sob, but something smaller, sharper, like glass cracking under pressure. Poirot continued, voice level. You loved him once. Then you loved the fortune more. When you discovered the trust, you felt betrayed. You spoke to Dr. Long. You offered him a partnership if he would help remove Reginald. But Lang hesitated. So you turned to Captain Drake. A desperate man is easier to direct than a cautious one. Lady Evelyn lifted her chin. I never asked anyone to kill him. No. You did not need to say the word. You only needed to plant the idea, to whisper the possibility, to let resentment do the rest. Poirot moved to Dr. Long. You and Lady Evelyn were lovers. Not recent passion. Old, cooled, convenient. You met in the garden house, behind the rose beds. You discussed patents. You discussed futures. You discussed what would happen if Reginald no longer stood in the way. You never intended murder. But when Captain Drake came to you after the blow, trembling, asking for help, you saw opportunity. You pronounced poison. You covered the truth. You performed the loyal colleague one last time. Long did not deny it. He only nodded once, slowly, as though the movement cost him everything. Poirot turned to Harold Fitzroy. And you, monsieur, you were not idle. You knew of the trust. You had seen the documents. Yet you hoped Reginald's death would force a renegotiation of the investment terms. You did not strike the blow, but you stood ready to profit from it. You lingered near the chamber door that night. You listened. You waited to see if the plan succeeded. Fitzroy gave a harsh laugh. I'm a businessman, not a murderer. A businessman who listens at doors. A businessman who leaves cigar ash where it should not be. Finally, Poirot faced Captain Drake. You struck the blow. One moment of rage, one moment of lost control. But the rest, the chalice, the projector, the illusion, was arranged with care. You needed help. You received it. And now, he made a small, open gesture with both hands. The backstage is revealed. The wires, the levers, the painted scenery. All of it. He stepped back so that the firelight caught every face. Greed wore the costume of grief. Resentment wore the costume of loyalty. Fear wore the costume of innocence. Love, old and poisoned, wore the costume of indifference. Every one of you performed. Every one of you forgot that the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Poirot paused. His green eyes moved slowly across them all. I'm reminded of a case in Venice many years ago. A beautiful woman drowned in the Grand Canal. Everyone said accident. Everyone wept most beautifully. But one small thing betrayed them. The gondolier who found her had been paid to look the other way. He had rehearsed his story so carefully. Shocked face, trembling voice, shaking hands. Yet when I asked him to describe the color of her dress, he answered at once. A man truly shocked does not notice color. He notices only horror, and this gondolier had seen the dress before. He had been paid before the body entered the water. The performance was perfect, until the question no one had rehearsed. He let the memory settle. Here too the questions came. Here too the answers faltered. The little details, the dry glove, the missing ash, the upside-down book, the untouched towel, none of them lied. Only the people lied, and people always leave traces. The fire had burned down to glowing coals. The room felt colder now, as though truth itself had lowered the temperature. Poirot spoke one last time, very softly. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. And behind every motive, the truth waits, patient, until the curtain is torn away. No one answered. No one moved. Outside, the wind had died completely. Only silence remained. Behind every curtain, no more secret. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The drawing room of Ashford Manor had become a courtroom without robes, a stage without scenery. Every lamp was lit, yet the light seemed to shrink inward, concentrating on the 5 people seated in a semicircle. The fire had been allowed to burn low. Only red embers glowed now, casting long, unsteady shadows across polished mahogany and velvet. The air held the ghosts of the night. Dying roses, stale cigar smoke, the faint metallic edge of fierce sweat beneath expensive cologne. No champagne remained on the trays. No one had touched a glass in hours. Hercule Poirot stood in the exact center of the room, small, immaculate, motionless. His hands were clasped behind his back. His green eyes moved slowly from face to face like a director scanning the cast before the curtain rises for the last time. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice quiet, yet carrying to every corner. You have each performed for Poirot, some truthfully, some not. The time has come to review the performances. Let us speak plainly. The final act has begun. He turned first to Lady Evelyn Hargrove. Madame, you played the grieving widow, magnifique in its restraint, the dry eyes, the perfect posture, the soft handkerchief pressed to a cheek that never needed it. But grief is not neat. Grief is chaos. You knew of your husband's death before the scream was heard, because you helped arrange the moment when it would come. You whispered poison into desperate ears. You let others hold the weapon so your hands would remain clean. The performance was elegant, but it was still a performance. Lady Evelyn did not flinch. Only her gloved fingers moved, smoothing an invisible crease from her skirt. Poirot stepped toward Dr. Victor Lang. You, doctor, performed the loyal colleague, the calm physician, the man of science who pronounced poison when the truth was far simpler, a single blow to the skull. You covered the wound, you arranged the chalice. You spoke of cyanide with such conviction that even the police believed. Loyalty does not lie about cause of death, doctor. Loyalty does not trade a man's life for future pardons. Lang stared at the carpet. His spectacles reflected the dying fire. Behind the lenses, his eyes were empty. Poirot moved to Clara Beaumont. Mademoiselle, you played the innocent niece, the fragile flower caught in a storm, not of her making. Wide eyes, trembling voice, the lost glove. You did not strike the blow. You did not plan the death, but you entered the chamber afterward. You saw the body. You left your glove in panic, and then you said nothing. Innocence does not hide evidence in silence. Innocence cries out. Clara pressed both hands to her mouth. A small choked sound escaped. Poirot turned to Harold Fitzroy. You, monsieur, performed the jovial rival, the hearty laugh, the cigar, the pretense that you were merely an interested investor. Yet you lingered near the chamber door. You listened. You waited to see if fortune would fall your way without effort. You did not kill. But you were ready to profit. And profit is also a performance. One that leaves ash where it should not be. Fitzroy attempted a smile. It died before it reached his eyes. Finally, Poirot faced Captain Arthur Drake. And you, Captain, you gave the most convincing performance of all. On the shocked friend, The loyal soldier, the man who rushed in first when the scream came, the outrage, the helpful cooperation. You stood on the terrace and waited for the moment you had created. You struck Reginald Hargrove from behind, one blow, clean, military. You carried him into the chamber. You placed the chalice. You started the projector to paint an illusion of slow poisoning. Magnifique, Captain. Almost perfect. Drake's shoulders had begun to sag. His hands hung loose at his sides. Poirot stepped closer. But you made one error. One small moment when the mask slipped. When I asked you to describe the exact time you heard the scream, you answered at once, 8:23. No hesitation, no glance at a watch. A man truly shocked does not know the precise minute. A man truly shocked is lost in horror. Aye, but you had rehearsed the moment in your mind many times. You knew the time because you planned it. Silence swallowed the room. Poirot raised both small hands in a slow, open gesture. The cast is assembled. The performances have been reviewed. The spotlight of truth now shines. Captain Arthur Drake, you are the leading performer. You struck the blow that ended Sir Reginald Hargrove's life. Dr. Lang, you covered the truth with a false cause of death. Lady Evelyn, you planted the seed of murder in desperate soil. Miss Beaumont, you witnessed and stayed silent. Mr. Fitzroy, you waited to gather the profit. He turned slowly, taking in every face once more. The theater of crime has many rules, but only one truth. Every actor eventually forgets their lines. Tonight, the lines are forgotten. The curtain falls. Poirot made one final, a deliberate movement, stepping back so that the faint red glow from the embers touched them all. Captain Drake, the performance is over. The mask has fallen. The truth takes its bow. No one spoke. No one moved. The grandfather clock in the hall began to strike 11. Each note fell like the last beat of a dying overture. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The drawing room at Ashford Manor felt suddenly too large. The lamps still burned, but their light no longer seemed to reach the corners. Shadows stretched long across the carpet, touching the velvet curtains, the empty champagne flutes, the low table where the crystal chalice sat like a forgotten prop. The fire had dwindled to a handful of red embers. The room carried the cold smell of cooling ash, mixed with the last traces of dying roses and cigar smoke that had soaked into every fabric. The grandfather clock struck the quarter hour after 11. The sound fell into silence like a dropped curtain. No one had moved since Poirot's final words. They remained in their semicircle, actors who had heard the stage manager call "strike the set," but could not yet remember how to leave the stage. Poirot spoke first, voice calm and measured. The performance is finished. The curtain has fallen. There will be no applause tonight, only justice. He turned to Captain Arthur Drake. Captain, you will accompany the police when they arrive. The blow you struck ended a life. No rehearsal can undo that moment. You will face what you have done. Drake did not protest. He only nodded once, a small, mechanical movement. His shoulders, so rigid all evening, seemed to collapse inward. He looked suddenly smaller, older, as though the uniform of the loyal friend had been stripped away and left him naked. He walked to the window and stared out at the black night, hands loose at his sides. No one tried to stop him. Poirot moved to Dr. Victor Lang. Doctor, you will also answer to the law, not for the killing, but for the lie that covered it. You pronounced poison when you knew the truth. You traded your honor for a share of potence that will never now be yours. Medicine is meant to heal. You used it to deceive. Lang lifted his head. His spectacles were fogged. He removed them slowly and polished the lenses on his sleeve with automatic care. I thought it could be clean, he said. No blood, no violence, just a story everyone would believe. Poirot regarded him without anger. Stories are never clean when they are built on a body. Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat perfectly straight. Her gloved hands rested in her lap. Her face showed no tears, no tremor. Yet something had changed in the eyes. Something flat and final, like a door that had closed forever. Poirot spoke to her quietly. Madame, you will not be charged with murder. The law requires more than whispers and suggestions. But society will judge you more harshly than any court. The friends you entertained here will not return. The invitations will stop. The name Hargrove will carry a shadow you cannot perfume away. She gave the smallest inclination of her head. I understand, she said. Her voice was steady, almost serene. For the first time that night, she looked directly at Poirot. I did not want him dead. I wanted him gone. There is a difference. Poirot inclined his head in return. The difference is small. The result is the same. Miss Clara Beaumont had begun to cry. Quiet, steady tears that left dark streaks on her cheeks. She no longer tried to hide them. Poirot approached her gently. Mademoiselle, you are young. You panicked. You said nothing when you should have spoken. That silence has cost you dearly tonight. But you did not kill. You did not plan. The law will see that. And time. He made a small open gesture. Time may forgive what the police do not. Clara looked up at him, eyes wide and red. Will I go to prison? No. Not prison, but shame. And shame is a long sentence. Harold Fitzroy had not spoken in many minutes. He sat forward now, elbows on knees, staring at the carpet between his feet. No, I didn't do anything, he said hoarsely. I just waited. Poirot regarded him. Waiting can be a crime when you wait for death to bring profit. The law will decide how far your waiting carried you, but the city will decide the rest. Your name will be whispered in boardrooms. Doors will close quietly behind you. That is justice of another kind. The room fell silent again. Only the faint ticking of the clock continued, steady and indifferent. Poirot walked once around the semicircle, small hands clasped behind his back. He stopped at the low table and arranged the 3 remaining glasses into a perfect line. Order restored, if only in this small thing. You have all worn masks tonight, he said. Some masks were heavy, some were light, some were beautiful. But masks are never comfortable for long. Sooner or later, the face beneath grows tired. The breath comes short. The eyes begin to show. He looked at each of them in turn. Tonight, the masks are removed. You see each other clearly now. You see yourselves clearly now. That is the cruelest moment of any performance. The moment when the footlights dim, and there is no more pretending. He stepped back. The police will arrive soon. Statements will be taken. Charges will be prepared. Justice begins now, not with handcuffs, but with truth spoken aloud. Lady Evelyn rose first. She smoothed her skirt with careful hands, then walked to the door without looking back. Her footsteps were slow, deliberate, the silk of her gown whispering against the carpet like a last line delivered off stage. Dr. Lang stood next. He placed his spectacles carefully on the table, as though leaving them behind. and then he followed her out. Clara remained seated a moment longer. She wiped her cheeks with the back of one hand, smearing the last of her makeup. Then she stood and left without a word. Fitzroy pushed himself up heavily. He looked once at Poirot, almost an apology, then walked away. Captain Drake remained by the window. When the others had gone, he turned. "I'm ready," he said simply. Poirot nodded. "Then we wait together." The two men stood in silence. Outside, headlights finally appeared at the end of the long drive, two pale beams cutting through the dark. The curtain call came. No applause, only justice. Chapter 9. After the show. Dawn came slowly to Ashford Manor, pale and reluctant. The sky outside the tall windows turned first the color of weak tea, then the soft gray of washed linen. Inside, where the drawing room looked like a theater after the last audience has left. Lamps still burning unnecessarily. Empty glasses catching the first light. Velvet curtains hanging limp and tired. The fire had died completely during the night. Only a faint smell of cold ash remained, mingling with the stale perfume of roses long past their prime, and the ghost of cigar smoke that refused to leave the upholstery. The police had come and gone before midnight. Statements had been taken in the library. Handcuffs had clicked once, quietly, almost apologetically, around Captain Drake's wrists. Dr. Lang had followed without protest, spectacles fogged, head bowed. Lady Evelyn had been allowed to remain in the house for the moment under caution. Her solicitor was already on his way from London, and Clara Beaumont had been questioned gently and then escorted upstairs by the housekeeper, who had wrapped her in a blanket like a child after a nightmare. Harold Fitzroy had driven away in his own car just after 1 o'clock, promising to present himself at the station the following morning. No one had tried to stop him. There was nowhere left to run. Hercule Poirot had stayed. He sat now at the small escritoire near the window, a cup of black coffee cooling untouched beside him. The coffee was rich and continental, its bitterness still on his tongue. But he had not drunk more than a sip. He arranged 3 pencils in perfect alignment, then rearranged them again. Order and method, even now. The house was quiet, except for the distant sounds of maids moving through the upper floors, soft footsteps on carpeted stairs, and the faint clink of trays being carried away. Life continued, mechanical and careful, as though the building itself understood that sudden noise would be indecent. Clara Beaumont appeared in the doorway just after 7. She wore a plain wool dress, no gloves, no makeup. Her eyes were swollen but dry. She hesitated on the threshold, then stepped inside. "Monsieur Poirot," she said quietly. He rose at once, small and courteous. "Mademoiselle, you did not sleep." "Not really." She looked around the room as though seeing it for the first time. "It feels empty." Poirot gestured to the chair opposite him. She sat. Her hands rested in her lap, no longer twisting anything. "I keep thinking about the glove," she said. "If I had spoken then, if I had told someone I went into the chamber." "You were frightened," Poirot replied gently. "Fear makes poor decisions look reasonable. But you are here now. You are speaking now. That is not nothing." She gave a small, tremulous smile. "The solicitor says I may not be charged, only warned. But I don't know how to go back to normal life, not after this." Poirot tilted his head. "Normal life will not return exactly as it was. But a new life can begin. You are young. You have time. Use it to learn the difference between silence that protects and silence that destroys." Clara nodded slowly. She looked toward the window. Outside, the first real sunlight touched the terrace. I think I'll go away for a while, she said. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one knows the name Hargrove. That is wise, Poirot said. Distance helps the heart remember what it wishes to keep and forget what it must release. Lady Evelyn entered next. She moved with the same controlled grace as always. But something in her posture had softened. Less armor, more resignation. She carried a small valise. Behind her, a maid followed with two larger cases. She stopped a few paces from Poirot. I'm leaving for London this morning, she said. The house will be closed. There will be no more weekends here, no more demonstrations. Poirot inclined his head. You have decided. I have decided, she echoed. I will sell what I can. The Partons will go into probate, whatever remains. I will live quietly, very quietly. She looked at Clara. I was never kind to you, she said. I saw you as a rival, for Reginald's affection. I was wrong. I hope one day you can forgive me. Clara's eyes filled again, but she did not look away. I don't know if I can forgive yet, she answered. But I don't hate you. Not anymore. Lady Evelyn gave the smallest of nods. Then she turned and left the room, footsteps measured, silk whispering one last time against the carpet. Harold Fitzroy did not return. A telephone call came later. He had presented himself at Scotland Yard as promised. His solicitor spoke of cooperation and mitigating circumstances. Poirot listened without comment. The city would finish what the law began. Reputations were fragile things, easily shattered by whispers. Poirot rose and walked to the window. The terrace lay empty now, wet from the night's mist, reflecting the pale morning sky. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The theatre had emptied. The actors had gone to their separate fates, prison for some, exile for others, shame for all. And the stage itself, Ashford Manor, would soon stand silent, its mirrors and projectors covered, its illusions backed away. But the lessons lingered. Truth had won, not through force, but through patience. Masks had fallen, not because they were torn off, but because they had grown too heavy to wear any longer. People had changed, not all for the better, but changed nonetheless. Clara would learn to speak when she should. Lady Evelyn would learn to live without performance. Even Drake, in the narrow cell that awaited him, might one day understand the cost of a single moment's rage. Poirot turned back to the room. He arranged the 3 pencils one final time, then left them in perfect order on the blotter. The theatre had emptied. No chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. Hercule Poirot sat alone in the small first-class compartment of the evening train to London. The carriage was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of wheels on rails and the faint clink of crystal as the attendants set down a fresh pot of tisane. Outside, the English countryside slipped past in soft twilight. Hedgerows, distant church spires, fields already dark. Inside, the compartment smelled pleasantly of good leather, polished wood, and the light herbal steam rising from the cup. Poirot had arranged 3 sugar cubes in a precise triangle beside the saucer. Order and method, even here. He wore his traveling suit of charcoal grey, the jacket folded neatly across the opposite seat. His small hands rested lightly on the arms of the chair. His green eyes gazed not at the passing landscape, but inward, at the theatre that had just closed. The newspapers of the next morning would carry the story in restrained headlines. Tragic death at Ashford Manor inventor killed in apparent accident, now revealed as murder, war hero. Confessors, physician and widow, implicated in cover-up. Society would whisper for months. Invitations would be quietly withdrawn. Fortunes would shift, but the headlines would tell only the surface. Poirot had seen the deeper play. He lifted the cup, tasted the tisane, warm, faintly sweet, and set it down again. People perform, he murmured to the empty compartment, because truth is too dangerous, too plain, too painful. They wear masks because the face beneath is not ready to be seen. Greed dresses as ambition. Fear dresses as caution. Or love, when it has soured, dresses as indifference. Hate dresses as loyalty. And always, always, the body betrays what the mask tries to hide. He thought of Captain Drake, a soldier trained to discipline, to control. Yet one moment of rage, one insult too many, and the hand had moved before the mind could stop it. The blow had been clean, military, almost professional. But afterward, the performance began. The calm return to the terrace, the rehearsed shock, the helpful rush toward the body. Drake had believed he could act the loyal friend convincingly. He had not counted on the tremor in his own hands, the way his voice dropped half a tone when the time of the scream was mentioned. The little grey cells had noticed. The little grey cells always notice. Poirot's thoughts moved to Dr. Lang, a man of science, accustomed to precision, to facts that could be measured. Yet he had traded those facts for a future that glittered only in imagination. The false diagnosis of cyanide poisoning had been delivered with calm authority, too calm. A truly shocked physician fumbles, hesitates, speaks of uncertainty. Lang had spoken with certainty because he had rehearsed the certainty. And rehearsal, Poirot knew, is the enemy of truth. Lady Evelyn had been the most subtle performer. She had not struck the blow. She had not lied about the cause of death. She had only whispered possibility into desperate ears. She had worn composure like armor, dry eyes, steady voice, perfect posture. But composure is also a tell. Genuine grief is messy. It leaves marks. Hers left none. Beneath the elegance had lain relief so complete it had dried her tears before they could form. She had mourned the man she once loved long before he died. The murder had merely completed a separation already accomplished in her heart. Clara Beaumont had been the least rehearsed. Her panic had been real, her silence born of fear rather than calculation. She had left the glove because she had not thought to remove it. She had said nothing because she did not know how to begin. Of all the players, she was the one who might one day remove her own mask willingly. Shame would teach her. Time would heal her. Youth would allow her to rebuild. And Fitzroy, greedy, opportunistic, never quite guilty, had waited in the wings, ready to step forward when the curtain fell. His punishment would not come from the law alone. The city has its own courts, its own sentences, closed doors, quiet withdrawals, invitations that never arrive. Sir Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "I am reminded," he said aloud to the empty seat opposite, "of the case of Roger Ackroyd, a man murdered in his study, a household full of perfect performances, shock, grief, innocence. Everyone played their part so well that the police saw only suicide. Yet one small detail, the steady hand reaching for a cigarette case, betrayed the murderer. He had rehearsed the shock in front of a mirror. He had practiced the gasp, the wide eyes. But the body does not practice. The body knows only truth." Here too the body spoke, The dry handkerchief, the untouched towel, the upside-down book, the single thread on the lever. Small things, insignificant things. But truth hides in the small things. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. The train swayed gently. On the wheels sang their steady song. Why do people perform rather than reveal? He continued softly. Because revelation costs. It costs pride. It costs security. It costs the story they have told themselves about who they are. So they dress the truth in costume. They light it with flattering angles. They speak lines they have rehearsed. But the stage is small. The lights are harsh. And sooner or later, the mask grows heavy. The breath comes short. The eyes betray. And truth, patient, quiet, inevitable, takes the stage alone. Poirot opened his eyes. He looked out at the darkening fields. Until the next theater of crime, mes amis, he said, almost as though addressing an audience beyond the glass. Poirot will be watching. He lifted the tisane once more. This time he drank deeply. The train carried him toward London, and toward the next curtain, the next set of masks. The performance never truly ends. Only the actors change. Until the next theater of crime, mes amis, Poirot watches always,